Welcome back to Skillcast. What we have today is Bill Mullet with us, and he is a design and build contractor. He's been doing it for many years. In fact, I wanted him to come on because I've been dealing with him even in my own personal life. He's helping me right now do a beautiful project where we're doing a nice little addition on our house, but also being able to put an in-law suite on our house. And in this process, I've been personally learning things about the skilled trades that I never knew before, framing, foundation, insulation, and well beyond. And I thought that it would be very nice and interesting to hear about how the skilled trades and Bill's life kind of connected and how it's brought him happiness. And I wanted to hear a little bit about his story since he deals with a whole lot of different aspects from the skilled trades. So, Bill, thank you for coming to this podcast and telling us a bit about your story. Tell me about what it is that you do. How long have you been doing this contracting work?
Well, I'd say we are closing in on 40 years, or we might be just slightly over, because I actually started my first job as a laborer for my cousin when I was 17, and I'm 57. So it's been a few years, but there's been lots of twists and turns and ups and downs in between. Yeah.
Beautiful.
So, yeah.
Well, tell me about, that's a beautiful arc for your life, a lot of years, a lot of investment in it. Tell me about how you got there. Maybe start by talking about your background a little bit. Like, how did you get connected to the skilled trades? And we'll get to how it evolved to today.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I grew up Amish. Grew up in a large family. I have 5 brothers and 3 sisters. And because of the way that I grew up, for us to be in the skilled trades was an expectation.
Yeah.
And so I came at it from a little bit of a different perspective than a lot of people do, because I, on the other hand, even though I was learning all this stuff, I had a desire for more education. And so I ended up pursuing that.
Today the MO is kind of like, you got to go to college for many Americans today, let's put it like that.
Yeah.
But, what was the response when you said that that's what you wanted to do?
Yeah. Obviously from my family, they were like, what? What are you talking about? You already have a skill.
Yeah.
And I had already started my own company in doing design building and such. This was 1987. It was sort of different. But I had a desire. I think it was more of a personal goal for me than it was of anything else, because growing up Amish the way that I did, you're done with school at 8th grade.
Yeah.
And I had a desire to want to have a more well-rounded worldview, which I think if I were now looking back, I think that really sort of did happen in the, obtaining of my GED, going to school, and especially through the general education courses.
Yeah.
But as far as the skill then that I took away from that, I served as a pastor for 20 years. But even that I would not have been able to do if I did not have my skilled labor, because I almost always had to supplement my income. And in fact, I knew a lot of friends who, had gone to school for being a pastor, and they did not have that. And they really, really, really struggled.
Yeah.
Myself and one other friend, he was a certified mechanic, so he always had that to fall back on. Yeah. And, of course, my construction. So it was a unique kind of an opportunity. I look at it and I see just how far that, God has brought us through all of that and really kind of showed us he can use dual purposes. He can use just about anything that we give to him.
Yeah, it's an interesting point, because I know that a lot of people are a little bit nervous about the skilled trades sometimes when they're thinking about crossing over into it, because they're feeling like it's going to get them locked into this world that they maybe don't know that much about, right? Then they invest all this time and skill. And what I've found for myself even is that in the investment of those skills that I've learned for myself, it's actually brought for my life a great amount of peace in the future decisions that I make, no matter, where my desires might change. Because let's be honest, like, it maybe was more common years ago that you'd work in one facility for 30 years and get the gold watch, right?
Yes.
But it's just no longer that way.
Right.
And I don't know that that's at times of change or companies have changed. That's probably for another time.
Right.
I like hearing what you're saying, because sometimes I think a good message for people to hear is that you can build a skill and you don't have to be locked into it
Right.
on this, 40-hour a week or whatever. It can serve other parts of your life, which is really the point of the job, right?
Right.
You want to serve humanity, but you want that job to serve your life and your life to flourish for humanity.
Yeah.
So, okay, you're in the Amish community. Everybody's excited about the skilled trades. It seems like. Can you unpack that a little bit more? Like, maybe not some of your first experiences, but what, everybody's assuming that the skilled trades are that way. Does everybody have their own businesses? How do you end up learning to become a contractor?
Yeah, I think that was probably really an invaluable part of my background is, that fact that amongst the Amish, widely, they are entrepreneurs. They have their own businesses. They've got stores. They've got, they're in the trades. They just start all different kinds of companies. So that was a part of my view that I think helped me when transition was necessary, to be able to not be so afraid of it, because I knew, hey, I'd seen that done before, and I'd seen how someone was doing something for a long time and then something happened, and they had to turn direction, go a different direction. And it didn't stop them. And I think that with that, I always had that security of knowing, because I had spent those early years of my life creating the skills, within, for me, it was finished carpentry and carpentry. I always knew that I could still make a living with my hands.
Yeah.
I wasn't like out there, wow, if I lose my occupation that I got my bachelor's degree in, that I'm going to, flounder. I'm going to be, like a fish out of water. But I knew and had confidence that, that I could, with my skilled labor, I could refine, hone that, make it whatever I needed to make it. Yeah. You're still pretty young, and, there will be things that come that change. And for us, in 2012, my wife was diagnosed with MS. And I was pastoring a church, and at that time, I had some outside work that I was doing, but not a lot. And all of a sudden, after a bunch of medical issues and stuff, she was diagnosed with MS and ended up having to quit working. And her job we had gotten our health care from. All of a sudden, I was faced with having to pick up, health insurance payments that amounted to a mortgage payment for 2 years.
Yeah, I was going to say, as a small business owner, that is not a small task.
No. And so, but the thing that made it possible is I was able to, the church I was pastoring gave me the leeway to do it. I was able to full-time go back to work at my skilled labor and able to make it. I don't know what would have happened if I wouldn't have had that, to be able to do that. So, yeah.
I've had the great benefit of being able to actually see a lot of people from the Amish community come and work on the addition.
Right.
Currently, that's happening in my house. And they're doing all sorts of different things,
right?
From foundation to framing to insulation to putting in windows and doors, right? They uncovered a completely rotted out wall in my house. And my wife and I lived with an open gaping hole with some plywood on it for a little while. But my point is that it's varied. And so as you're growing up in a community that encourages you in skilled trades, how did you determine what your affinity was towards? Was it by association? Unpack that a little bit more.
I guess for me, my dad was a tool and die maker, which is a very unique animal amongst the Amish people. He was awarded a master's degree for being a tool and die maker. Worked in a rubber shop, as you alluded to earlier, for 42 years, at one place. But anyway, he always wanted to be a carpenter. I think that was sort of part of the aspiration. He made some of our cabinets and different things like that on the side on his own. Yeah. I'm not exactly sure where I picked up the designing and drafting side of it, but I think that that's sort of what ultimately captivated my creative juices, is being able to create a project, on paper first, like put someone's dreams down on paper and be able to, do that first. And then obviously sort of the frosting on the cake is to be able to actually build it and see it. But that creative part, honestly, I'd have to think about like where that sort of came from. I always sort of said that I believe that God has made all of us to want to be creators. And that's sort of, I think, just how it has unfolded in my life as I've really enjoyed. So I enjoy doing that part of it.
Yeah. I mean, like, listen, my story is that I'm in the skilled trades and boiler operation, which is boiling water. And if you ever listened to your grandmother, she told you not to watch the pot because it won't ever, right? It wasn't something that I prepared for, right? So I can get that. Like, there's not a moment or time that I can say, oh, I knew that I wanted to do this. But I will tell you, after I built skill in it and the benefits of that came into my life and the knowledge of it, even the idiosyncrasies and what can feel boorish from the outside, all of a sudden became a true passion. And I found out that passion is not just followed. It can be formed. It can be created.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's talk about university right now. And let me just preface it with this. Like, we, as a skilled trade promoter, I suppose, we are not afraid of college. We don't want to push people away from college. I went to college. My wife is nearly done with getting her doctorate right now. Like, that's a very happy, common tone in our house. We know that college is necessary. But I want to talk about it maybe from your perspective. What's your view on it? And maybe a more modern view on college and the value of it today.
Yeah. I think that the education system today is going to, and I think already has begun to, sort of evolve into more of a sort of a cohesion of parents teaching, peers teaching, and also, educational, and there's things that you have to have. If you're going to be a doctor, you're going to have to go to, you're going to have to go to school for, medical school and such. But as far as in our world and what a lot of our children are involved in, I think one of the biggest things that you give your child the opportunity to when you teach them a skilled labor is that you give them the opportunity to, first of all, take college at their pace, and to second, to be able to sort of evaluate that and be able to say, okay, is this really where my heart is? Or could my heart possibly be in something where I am creating with my hands and doing those kinds of things? So I definitely, I look back at like my time in university studies, and I love it. I love it. And I think probably I have a greater love for it because I didn't get to go to high school, different things like that. So I do love it, but I have now, especially in my later years, as I say, being 57, now when I look back, I realize just how invaluable that a skilled labor is in conjunction with whatever education that you have.
Yeah, and I think what we've been seeing, modernly is like maybe a pulse and rhythm that has been shifting a little bit from credentials and certifications into proven skills.
Yeah.
And I'm saying that from the point of view of not just somebody who's excited about the skilled trades, but I'm saying that that's, more evidence-based from the companies who are hiring. Which, like, if you're looking into the job market, that's probably something you ought to consider is what are the companies most valuing today in that way. So, again, we're super excited about people getting good careers where that path may lead you. But we found that we need to elevate the skilled trades as well to a equal value many times to where the value of certifications from.
Yeah, I think that itself right there, I think you really hit the nail on the head right there. And that is to really let this generation coming up now try to give them an understanding that to choose one over the other does not diminish the value of the one they didn't choose, or vice versa. They are equally able to give you a fulfilled life, make a good living, and in fact, right now, the skilled labor, you can go see the studies, skilled labor is probably going to outperform your average college degree.
Yeah, yeah. That's been kind of the rumbles, in some of those studies, and in the view and perspective of hourly rates, as if everybody's working 40 hours. The reality is, and you could look at it both ways in the skilled trades, but many people get to work overtime. Many people on a salary job, me included, I've done this before, had to work overtime, and you get paid the same rate, you know what I mean? In the skilled trades, you often get overtime. And those studies aren't always today showing that. Like if you do a simple Google search today, most career salaries are going to be higher in wage than your skilled trades, but it doesn't show maybe the full picture all the time in that way. But let's go on to passion and motivation here, because I've heard that about your construction, and I will tell you about this. Like, again, I don't want to keep coming back to it, but it's just very poignant in our life right now as we've had people coming in and out of this addition. And I can tell you, as a person who knows nothing about building an addition, the process going through this with you and how you've been able to handhold us was enlightening and very, obviously exciting, but enjoyable as well, in the sense that, like, we sit in our living room at night dreaming up what we could do. And in talking with a professional like yourself who has these skills, we've realized what it is that we could do, right? And more that we hadn't considered as well. And so just as I'd say a consumer of your skills, it's been a very enjoyable experience. I want you to talk about, what is it today on your projects that, even if, like, you had already responded, you're not really sure why you went into drafting, for example, right? And design, but how about today? What is it that you enjoy about it?
It still always ends up going back to the creative side of it. And I think it's just innate in our nature. It's the way God made us. I would say probably that the things that I love the most, I love to try to create circumstances and situations where my customers are satisfied. In fact, I maybe just kind of as an example, I remember my son, when he got out of the Marine Corps, went to work for a construction company. And the initial jobs that he was on, all of those initial jobs were all commercial jobs. And I remember after the first year or so, us talking and him just talking about, he wasn't finding the satisfaction in some of it. And as we explored it, we kind of came down to where we realized that a part of it is he was getting zero feedback of appreciation from what he was doing. Because generally speaking, on large commercial construction jobs, you're not doing it for the end user. You're doing it for the owner of the building. And the owner of the building may be giving accolades to the owner of the construction company, but those are not coming back to the worker. And so we kind of realized, and that made me realize and have a fresh appreciation for residential work, because almost all of our work is for the end user.
Yeah.
And so I love to take the dreams of the customer, the client, putting it on paper, and then eventually building it. But also, you referred to your job, when I am able to see something, like when we found the pre-Civil War siding, and we stopped, I told my guys, I said, stop, just stop.
Well, let's tell the people what this is. So, like, my house right now is like 6 years away from being 200 years old. The idea is that some of the wood that they used must be used from pre-Civil War times. And part of the addition that we're using is the old exterior of the house. So we pulled the new exterior off and revealed the old exterior, which was this pre-Civil War.
Yeah, old lap siding,
Which we had no idea.
Right. Yeah, I walked in and my guys were dismantling the siding, and what we all thought we were just going to drywall that wall. And so as I saw it, my juices just went nuts, and I'm like, wait, you guys got to stop, and I called for John and Molly to come and to look at it. And I'm like, we could do like a feature wall that people will always be able to look at and see this house and realize like the era that it came from, at least the core of it. That to me is like the ultimate excitement in my line of work. I mean, it just is. It's like one of those things that you don't get to do on nearly every job. So when you have the opportunity to, and I loved you guys' reaction, you were like, let's do it. Let's just do it,
We love it. We
Yeah.
love it so much.
Yeah, and then even the idea that you came up with afterwards for also showcasing part of the beam structure of the house. I love that too. I absolutely love that. Those are like highlights that, you can't buy that stuff.
Which is why we were so glad to work with somebody who was soft to the touch on that and understanding old houses.
Yeah.
All right. So in the skilled trades, sometimes it seems like in response to decades now of pushing people into college, we talk about the skilled trades only as a spotlight, maybe only as a cheery kind of frame of point. Listen, it's work. You know what I mean? Like, work is always going to be work, no matter how passionate you are about it. If somebody's telling you otherwise, they're not being honest.
Exactly.
Right?
Very true.
Good days, there's bad days.
Yes.
The phrase I always try to tell even my boiler operators is like, choose work that you're willing to work at, because there's going to be hard days in it. So tell me about that. What are the challenges in your experience with the skilled trades?
Yeah. I think, again, largely in the residential trades, you're always dealing with customers. If you don't do well with dealing with people, you're going to struggle with that. I remember when I started, I was very happy to just do maybe the finished carpentry, let other people do it. Because as soon as I started thinking about coordinating all of these other aspects and stuff, I started to, nearly hyperventilate and all kinds of things, just thinking like, I can't do this. I can't do this. But learning to walk through that and to work through that. And now when I look at them, I sometimes wonder, why did I think I couldn't do that? Because I had somehow made it something that it, in all honesty, really isn't.
Yeah.
But I think also I needed to learn and refine my skill, in doing it. There are definitely still things that are difficult. And, to go back to one of the things you alluded to was, what? It is never easy work. Yeah. And nobody's going to shake you out of bed. You're going to have to shake yourself out of bed.
Maybe a new Tesla robot.
Yeah, exactly. And they actually make alarm clocks now that vibrate your pillow. But as far as that self-motivation, that's so important. And I think, one of the things that really gave me an appreciation for that was I had my own business in my early 20s, went to college, came out, was, did the pastoring thing, but helped that along with my skilled trades. But then when I went back to work, I started working for my brother. And for about 10 years, I worked for him. And in doing that, I got a whole new appreciation for just loafing on a job or, not really going after it, not really working hard. I suddenly, saw with totally new eyes how easy that is to happen. And when you own a business, you can't do that. You have to continue to attend to what you're doing. As you know, nobody's going to call for you and make appointments and follow up and things like that unless you assign somebody to it. You have to have that self-motivation to want to push forward. And so I think that, that's one of those things that it's invaluable. It really is. And it might, I don't know, I've never really pursued this, but it might even sort of dictate whether or not you are cut out to be a business owner or if you just maybe are cut out to work, in the skilled trades. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, certainly the checks do not simply keep coming if you're the one who's having to make the proposals. That's for sure.
Yes, exactly.
There's a lot to it. And even in the skill itself, I can firmly remember one of the hardest challenges in getting into skilled trades was really in my own identity on it. I always compare it to like elevator mechanics, right? If you're a top elevator mechanic right now, they're saying that you're getting over $200,000 a year, which is very desirable. I don't care who you are, right? That's a very high commodity.
Right.
But when you consider the pathway up against that, one of the things that you have to identify yourself with is man, I'm going to have to know the different models of elevators for decades and decades, and the little doohickeys and nuances that deal with it. I can't speak to it because I haven't done anything with it, right? But that, in my own trade, from outsiders' point of view looking in, that's not very desirable. That's a challenge. That's a hurdle that I would have to get over, because it wasn't what many people, again, will tell you in growing up in this modern age, is that you ought to follow your passion. I don't really feel that passionate about
for that part
or the right kind of cable for this elevator. Right? I think one of those central messages is that the challenges that are there, it is, there's no way of getting around it. It is a challenge, whether it's hard work, cold days, your back hurts, or even just the motivation to keep going, because it's all back-breaking work, right? But what I find is that there's nothing more valuable than setting yourself apart with a skill that you've built, certainly. And if you can retranslate your brain in such a way that says, when I feel hardship, when I feel challenges, it is exactly that. I'm in the bed of challenge. However, it's very valuable, right? And it sets me apart, because not everybody's going to do this. Let's be honest here. Like, the job market is competitive always. No matter if there's many jobs available or not, the good jobs are always competitive. And so, challenges are challenges, but they present an opportunity. Sure. So I can get that. In what ways do you think the skilled trades for you have positively impacted your personal life and your relationships? So beyond just the work itself, how did connection to the skilled trade help those around you?
I think it kind of starts with my own family members. One of the things that has been so gratifying as a dad is to know that all three of my children have the common problem-solving skills that they have learned by what I've done all the way, through their lives. There's many phone calls I get where, hey, Dad, I'm doing this, and so the first thing that happens is like a great joy bubbles up. I'm doing this, okay. Just wanting some, a measure of tutoring on this. How do I do this? But also in a lot of other people whose lives you get to touch. And I think that's a part of that whole skilled trade stigma, if you want to call it, is, when college was always talked about, the greatest minds will go to college. However, in the skilled trades, if you don't learn problem solving, you're going to be stuck. That is something that was sort of said, but it's not really true. Problem solving is a huge thing in life.
Like, people in the skilled trades do not know how to problem solve all the time.
They don't.
That you can see the effect of it. People will get bad things in that way. So first of all, watching it with my children and seeing how they've done it and are now passing it on to their children, but also in other people's lives. And most recently, in the past couple of years, I've been able to have like summer interns from architectural programs to work with me on my drafting project. Drafting side of it, and also in the actual construction work. So being able to input into these young lives that this is something worthy of pursuing, but letting them have a realistic visualization of what's actually happening. The one gentleman who was an intern for me this summer, when he had seen your project on Blueprint. And so once we were about to the point of, I think we were just about ready to start framing, I took him with me over to your house to see it. And the look in his eyes was just, it was worth $1 million. He was like just in awe of what this actually looks like. This massive hole that has now got basement around it, foundation, and all of that. So, when I look at it, I get so much fulfillment on that, and in seeding back into this generation, and that's, I think, part of what my current thrust is, to just do everything I can to let the young generation know, what this is. And I think that's one of the greatest fulfillments for me. It is.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it so much. There's many contributing factors, and I talk about this a lot in the book of why I believe we are where we are in a skills gap, if you want to call it that way, and desiring for people to be in the skilled trades. For me, what that has caused is like, some days it feels like I could work 24 hours and, and still be behind.
Yeah.
I mean, we're booking out jobs well into next year.
Right.
And if I was honest, I could probably cut it for next year already.
Yeah.
It's a little overwhelming at times.
Yeah.
Because you're trying to serve out of that passion.
Right.
It's enjoyable. You could very easily get overworked.
Yeah.
How do you, and like, I have a wife. I really like being married. I don't want to ruin that.
Yeah.
I got 4 kids.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I have family.
So important. Yeah.
How do you balance that?
Well, one of the things I did, I was probably about your age, actually maybe even a little younger, because I think I started my first business when I was 21.
This guy's
but one of the things I did, I was a young married Christian man.
Yeah.
And I had a gentleman who was a contractor from our church who spoke into my life. And he really, really encouraged me. He's like, Bill, you need to do this. Your kids are young. He's like, you have to set boundaries. And he said, he really encouraged me to think it through and come up with my own boundaries and what will work for our family. So my wife and I did. We sat down. We're like, okay, so here's what we'll do. I will work full 5 days a week, full bore and what I have to do. But when I come home in the evening, I have kids. So the evenings are the kids. And then Saturday, Sunday, if I did have an estimate, which is about the only thing I would do on Saturday because I promised that I would be at home doing home things and things like that. So if I did do something at, where I had an estimate or something, I would take one of the kids with me. I know that might not be possible in some circumstances, but in my circumstance in residential building and remodeling, it was always possible. Yeah. And then Sundays, was a family day. We'd go to church. We'd do those kinds of things. And I tell you, looking back at that, I would not exchange a single thing about that because I look at it and I realize that gave the foundation for my children, who are now, the oldest is 37, the youngest 33, and, they have my grandkids. And the way that they do things is I see those same things being carried out. But you must prioritize. You absolutely must prioritize because if you don't, people will run your life.
Bill, this conversation has been very helpful for me even to get to know you a little bit and more about your skilled trades. Can you tell me, as you reflect on how this has impacted your life and your future, and thinking about the people who are listening, who are considering the skilled trades for themselves, maybe for the first time, right? It's seriously. Do you have any thoughts that you want to share?
Yeah, there's a thing that I sort of try to make or allow it to sort of steer where I'm going. And I've just written it down. I said, if you're not having fun and enjoying what you're doing, it's probably time to reevaluate and to make some changes in what you're doing. So I think that's something that I've had to numerous times step back and kind of look at what I'm doing and say, am I having fun at this? And I'm not saying every moment. We all know every moment isn't always fun.
Yeah.
But overall, am I having fun? Because you know what? If I'm having fun, I'm going to be motivated to keep going forward, all those kinds of things.
I'm really glad that the skilled trades have served your life in that way. And you've, because of that, been able to give even people like me a beautiful new addition to live in, new passion for your life and for the people around you as well. Thank you for serving
You're welcome.
in the skilled trades, and thank you for sharing your story.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thanks for watching our video. If you want to see more content like this, be sure to like and subscribe us on our channels. And if you want to continue the conversation to find out if there's a skilled trade that's built for your future career, be sure to pick up our book called Skill Stigma at skillstigma.com.